When did criticism become hate? Because after looking into this whole India Arie and Young Miami situation, I really think people started combining a bunch of different conversations into one. So before I play India's clip, let me back up for a second. Now, at this point, most people have heard Young Miami's Spin That. If you haven't intentionally streamed it, you've probably heard it on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts. Social media made sure of that.
Well, all my scamming ass niggas at spending that money fast, 20s, 50s, 100 cash. Way going that go, y'all bad. Boosting bitches where y'all at. Stuffing that shit in y'all bag just to flip it, pop some tags. Girl going that go, y'all bad. Spin that shit. Spin that shit. Spin that shit. Nigga, spin that shit.
Now, this part is important because this isn't just another song. This is Young Miami's biggest hit and biggest solo breakthrough. After City Girls, there were a lot of questions about what her solo career was going to look like. Then Spin That takes off, starts climbing the charts, and becomes one of the biggest songs of the summer. Now let's fast forward to the BET Awards that took place last weekend. Young Miami comes out to present an award, and before she can really get started, the audience starts singing Spin That. They just kept going, and she has to wait for them to settle down before she can continue. Now let me show y'all that clip right quick.
Summer BET, please welcome Young Miami.
What's up, BT?
Now keep that moment in the back of your mind, because I don't think India was just responding to the song. I think she was responding to what the song had become. One of the biggest songs of the summer, a song that people knew word for word, an entire song that had the audience singing it at the BET Awards. And after that, India shared her thoughts. Then the internet did what the internet always does. It was her comments from other people, thread posts, blog headlines. They all started getting things mixed together. One of the biggest claims was that India was calling for people to boycott Young Miami's song. But after listening to India's full response, as well as actually seeing where that original post had came from, I don't think that was a fair characterization of what she said. She actually addressed that directly. So before we get into what people think she meant, let's listen to what she actually said.
And I've been in the blogs a couple times this last week, and so I wanted to come and talk about these things. Let's talk about the easy one first. It is being wrongly reported that I think we should boycott this song of the summer, but I don't think we should boycott. What I want is to see people understand the power of words and music and to make choices that are healthy for them. That's what I want. Do I think it matters what I want for people? No. I have finally learned that it doesn't matter and that there's no amount of sacrificing my life force energy that is going to make anybody want anything better for themselves. All I can do is emanate what I emanate, stand for what I stand for, and hope that it reaches who it's meant to reach. My comment makes it very clear that I don't think we should boycott. My comment is tantamount to everybody doesn't want the same thing. And there are a lot of people who are saying it's just a song. Well, if that's what you think, enjoy. But what I know is that music has power. But of course, I have used that power to help some people, and I have traveled around this world twice, and I see the impact of what we export out of the Black American experience to the rest of the world. Longer story for another time, but I've seen it, so I know, and I'm telling you what it is, but you enjoy if that's what you want to do, and I will enjoy doing what I want to do. And that's why I don't think anybody needs to boycott. I think people just need to make choices for themselves. That's what I think. That's one. Two, I was also in the blogs because I made comments about Clive Davis. And I said, watch what kind of stories you're going to see coming out about him. I signed my record deal when I was 22 years old. And so I learned about human nature through the lens of the music industry. So I got a full hot dose of all of it. And I know what kind of stories are going to come. I don't need to say anything more because you're going to hear
All right, y'all. So India said people should make their own choices. Now, whether you agree with how she views music, that is a different conversation. And whether you believe music has the kind of power that she's talking about is a different conversation as well. But let's address what she actually said. because one thing I noticed is that she continued to come back to choice. She wasn't saying take the song down. She wasn't saying Young Miami shouldn't be successful. She wasn't saying nobody should listen to it. She said people should understand the power of music and make choices for themselves. Now, that is where the disagreement actually starts, because there are people who genuinely believe it's just a song, and there are people who believe music carries messages that can influence culture. And that has been debated for decades. So I don't know why people are acting like this conversation just started. We've been having conversations about music, lyrics, and influence for as long as I can remember. We've seen it back in the day with gangster rap, conscious rap, female rap, rock music, heavy metal. People have always debated whether music influences people. Now, here's another thing that stood out to me. India also says she's traveled around the world and seen the impact of what America exports, particularly through Black culture. And that's actually a much bigger conversation than whether you like this one song, because now we're talking about representation. We're talking about what has become visible. We are talking about what people associate with us as Black Americans. Now, before anybody twists my words, no, I am not saying that this song represents all Black women. And I have already talked about these type of topics on this channel. Just like gangster rap never represented all Black men, no song represents an entire community. However, I do think it's fair to ask whether the messages that receive the most visibility can shape perception over time. And that's a discussion. Now, another thing I kept seeing in the comments was, well, why doesn't she say this about male rappers? Now, if you're asking whether male rap has been criticized, then the answer is absolutely. For decades, gangster rap was blamed for violence. Politicians got involved. Parents got involved. There were investigations. There were explicit labels that were put on albums. That conversation has been happening for over 30 years. If you're asking why India didn't use this moment to criticize male rappers, because she chose to talk about this moment, and she's allowed to do that. Every public figure doesn't have to address every issue before they're allowed to address one. And I actually think that's where people started losing the plot, because instead of responding to the question that she asked, people started questioning why she wasn't asking different questions. And those aren't the same thing. And here's another thing that caught my attention after reading through the comments. The conversation stopped being about the question and became about India. She's jealous, she's bitter, she's an old washed up hater. And none of that tells me whether she's right or wrong. It just tells me how you feel about India. And I think that's something we've gotten really comfortable doing online. We respond to the person before we respond to the point. Now, if you think India is wrong, tell me why. If you think music doesn't have the kind of influence she's talking about, make that argument. If you think she's overstating the impact of one song, cool. Let's have that conversation. But saying somebody is jealous because they critiqued the song, I don't know how we even got there. And here's another comment I kept seeing. Why can't Young Miami just have her moment? Who said she couldn't? Who and what is even stopping her? And that's something else I do not understand. Because when did criticism become taking something away from someone? Because Young Miami can have a hit, make money, chart, perform, grow her career, and people can still discuss the message. Those things are not mutually exclusive. Success doesn't make somebody exempt from criticism. Matter of fact, public success invites public criticism. That's a part of being a public figure. And no, that doesn't mean bullying. That doesn't mean harassing people. That doesn't mean making ad hominem attacks. I don't think all criticism is valuable. Some criticism is thoughtful, some criticism is pure lazy, and some criticism is just people wanting attention. And there is a difference. But I don't think we should throw criticism itself away because some people don't know how to do it. And here's something else that I noticed. Constructive criticism isn't always rooted in dislike. Sometimes people critique because they see potential. Sometimes people genuinely think you're capable of more. Sometimes people simply have different values. That doesn't automatically make them miserable. It doesn't automatically make them jealous. And it doesn't automatically mean they're trying to stop your success. Now let's talk about something else I see all the time. Whenever Black people start having conversations about our own culture, It doesn't take long before somebody says, well, what about white people? What about men? What about ... How does that answer the question we're talking about in the moment? I'm not saying those conversations don't matter. They do. I'm asking why we keep leaving this one. Because even after people brought up male rappers, even after people brought up Cardi, even after people brought up everybody else, the original question still never got answered. That's why I say there's a difference between asking whether somebody is being consistent and using somebody else to avoid the original conversation. And those aren't the same thing. India doesn't have to speak on every artist. She doesn't have to critique every rapper. She doesn't have to critique every social issue. She doesn't have to become the spokesperson for every issue before she's allowed to have an opinion about this one. She chose to comment on this moment. People are free to disagree with her, and they're also free to critique her. That's how public conversation works. But let's critique what she actually said. Not what somebody on Thread said, not what a blog headline said, not what somebody in the comments said she meant, but what she actually said. And I think we'd have a whole lot better conversation if we started there. Success doesn't exempt anybody from criticism. It doesn't matter if it's your first hit, your biggest hit, or the biggest moment of your career. The moment you release your art to the public, people are going to celebrate it, criticize it, interpret it, and debate it. That's not hate. That's what public art has always invited. Now, whether you agree with India or disagree with her really isn't my point here. My point is that we should respond to what people actually say, not what a headline says, not what somebody on Threads say they meant, not what somebody in the comments interpreted, but what they actually said. Because if we stop doing that, we're no longer having conversations. We're having arguments with versions of people that don't even exist. Now, I also don't believe every critique adds value. Some criticism is thoughtful, some criticism is lazy, some criticism is personal, some criticism is meant to help somebody grow. Those aren't all the same thing. But I also don't believe we should become so uncomfortable with criticism that every disagreement gets labeled as hate, jealousy, or bullying. Because if we do that, we lose the ability to challenge ideas without attacking people. And I don't think that's healthy for anybody. Another point that I want to make before I wrap this up, y'all, is that I think we are treating this like somebody has to be right and somebody has to be wrong. Sometimes that's not what criticism is about. Sometimes it's about values. Everybody doesn't have the same morals. Everybody doesn't have the same standards. Everybody doesn't have the same expectations for what they want out of music, and that's perfectly fine. Nobody has to become somebody they're not. I don't think the goal is for everybody to think the same or act the same. I think the goal is to understand what we're actually disagreeing about. Because two people can listen to the exact same song, hear the exact same lyrics, and walk away with two completely different opinions. That doesn't automatically make one person a hater. It may just mean that they are coming from two completely different value systems. When did criticism become hate? Can we still critique public art without people assuming we're attacking the artist? Can music influence culture without determining individual behavior? And when somebody asks a question we don't like, are we responding to the question or are we responding to the person asking it? Y'all let me know what y'all think down in the comments. If you enjoyed the discussion, go ahead and hype the video. And if you know somebody who's been following this conversation, share it with them too. I'd be interested in hearing their thoughts on this topic. Thank y'all for watching, and I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.